Greetings, brothers and sisters. My name is Baba Malik Yakini. I have the sacred honor of serving as the Executive Director of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. And I'd like to talk to you today about some of the work that we do and why we do what we do. But first, whenever I have the opportunity to speak before a group of people, I'm obligated to give praise to our Creator, who sustains our lives and has created this delicate balance of energies between the physical and the spiritual world, which allows us to exist in harmony with plants and animals on the planet in a reciprocal relationship, a symbiotic relationship that sustains our physical lives. Secondly, I like to give homage and honor to my ancestors, both those that we as African people share collectively and those who are in my personal bloodline, upon whose shoulders I stand. I'd like to tell you a little about myself before I get into the work of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, because I think it's important anytime someone stands before you to speak that you know who's speaking to you. I feel honored to have turned 60 years old just recently, and so I've officially entered the beginning of elderhood, which is a responsibility that I take seriously. I've been a long-term activist in the Black liberation movement, and I am very fortunate to have come into consciousness in the late 1960s when I was in the 8th grade as a result of some teachers who I had who played Malcolm X records for us in class and exposed us to Black Panther Party newspapers and other radical thought, which helped me to begin to question my position in the society as a young black man and to question what at that time I called racism in American society and throughout the world, and to look critically at the condition of black people both in the United States and throughout the world. So that was eye-opening for me and put me on a journey that I've stayed on since that time, striving to uplift our people, both here in Detroit, where I live and where I have lived all of my life, and also having this Pan-African consciousness that our destinies are collectively tied no matter where African people are throughout the world. I've also put in work to advance African people globally. From 1989 until 2011, I served as the director of an African-centered school in Detroit called Ujamaa Institute. And we started doing serious gardening with the children in 1999, 10 years after the school was started, because we moved into a building that had enough space around it that allowed us to create this garden. We always knew that was important, but we just didn't have the physical space to do it. We had one other short-term attempt several years earlier, but we had to move from that building and the garden ended up being destroyed. So in 1999, we had the opportunity to create a school garden, which we did, and we required all of the students in the school, and at that time there were more than 200 students attending the school in kindergarten through 8th grade. We required all of the students, every class in the school, to participate in some way in the school garden. Some classes planted, some classes watered, some classes weeded, some classes harvested. Teachers participated, parents participated, and as a result of a visit to Detroit by my Jegna, so-called mentor, Anand Laloli, a brother who originally is from Guyana, South America, but who lived in Toronto, Ontario in the 1980s, 90s, and in this current decade, came to Detroit. We had been long-term friends from playing reggae music years ago. And he exposed me to this larger concept called food security. And he worked with us at the school. He and his wife, Sister Tafari, worked with us to develop a food security curriculum at the school, which, although the curriculum wasn't fully developed, it was in outline form. It prescribed for teachers at every grade level the types of things that they should be incorporating into their lessons to make sure that students had an understanding of the factors that are needed to grow food, of the cultural implications of food in the society, of the economics of food, about nutrition. And so we required that every teacher in the school had at least one lesson per week that had a food security tie-in, whether it was the gym teacher or the art teacher or the science teacher or the Kiswahili teacher. All the teachers in the school had to find some way to incorporate these lessons about food. So we made it part of the school culture. And so that energy continued to grow. And by 2003, we had parents who said, well, I have a vacant lot next to my house and I'd like to start a garden. Can you help with that? And we created something called the Shamba Organic Garden Collective. Shamba is a Kiswahili word which means small farm. So we created the Shamba Organic Garden Collective, and we had more than 20 gardens that were part of this collective in various parts of the city of Detroit. Some of the gardens were in backyards of teachers or parents from the school. Some of the gardens were on side lots, vacant lots next to the houses of teachers or parents at the school. And we worked collectively. We had a team that would go out in the morning called the Groundbreakers. That they would go out on Saturday mornings and till the gardens for people. We did the most labor-intensive part in hopes that if we remove the labor-intensive part, that more people would actually plant the gardens. And in most cases, that was the case. So we had these 20 gardens. We would work together. We would share ideas. We would share information. We would buy seeds collectively. And it was a wonderful thing. So this energy continued to grow. And by late 2005, we saw the need for a larger container to hold this work, because we saw that there were people outside of our immediate school community who were also interested in this work that we were doing. And we also saw that within the larger food movement in the United States, that although much of the work that was being done, that was being called either food security work or food justice work, was being done in black communities, or in some cases in so-called Latino communities, that the people leading that work were often young whites. And so that didn't sit well with us at all. In fact, we don't believe that white people should come in our communities and lead anything, that we have the responsibility to lead ourselves. And so after attending a conference, a national conference in Atlanta, I saw that this trend was happening not just in Detroit, but this trend was happening nationally. And so in early 2006, we formed the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network to ensure that Detroit's African-descended population was organized in order to create greater food security in our community. We understood early on that the most effective movements grow organically out of the communities that they're designed to serve. We push back heavily against the kind of missionary approach that many nonprofits take, sending people into our communities to do work that's food related. Again, we think we have the obligation and the responsibility to lead ourselves. So we formed in February of 2006. We had about 40 members, co-founders who attended that initial meeting, some of whom were long-term activists in the Black Liberation Movement, some of whom were former food co-op operators, some of whom were chefs and raw foodists, and some were gardeners. And so we brought all these folks together, all these black folks who had some interest in food, so that we could create an organization that worked towards building power for black people, particularly in the areas of food justice and food security. We were very concerned that in the city of Detroit, which according to the 2010 census has 713,000 people, 83% of whom are so-called African American. We were concerned that we don't have good access to fresh, high quality food in the city of Detroit. Or I should say we have limited access. In 2007, Farmer Jack, which was a national chain grocery store, was the last of several chain grocery stores to close its doors in the city of Detroit. And so we were left with about 70 smaller stores, which are primarily owned by Chaldeans. Chaldeans are a Christian ethnic group from Iraq who have been merchants for many, many, many centuries. And so, although the population in Detroit is overwhelmingly black, the places that we go to buy our food are overwhelmingly owned by Chaldeans and other people from the so-called Middle East. Often, because this system of white supremacy is a global phenomenon, people even coming from the so-called Middle East have a very negative view of African people in America. And so that, combined with the fact that they're often coming into our community as merchants in a more powerful position than the residents of the community, creates an environment which is ripe for abuse. And so we witnessed on multiple occasions store owners or clerks working in these stores being disrespectful to black women and black children and black men. For example, black women going in to buy a loaf of bread or a dozen eggs and being propositioned for a date, or, store owner calling a baby a honey or some other inappropriate term. We witnessed on multiple occasions, and I've experienced many times myself what I call a wordless transaction, where we go to these stores, smaller stores I'm referring to now, what we call in Detroit party stores, that sell cigarettes, alcohol, potato chips, candy, and other things like that. So many times in these stores, after you purchase your item, there's no thank you, there's no come again for your business, there's no respect for your humanity. And so we saw all of this happening in the city of Detroit, and we knew that we had a tremendous opportunity because Detroit has been systematically disinvested in. And that disinvestment has resulted in large portions of the city of Detroit being vacant land. In fact, it's estimated that 1/3 of the city's approximately 140 square miles is vacant land. And so we knew we had the opportunity to not just complain about how others were treating us, but to actually engage in producing food, to go from just words to works, to begin to grow food that we were consuming, and to begin to infuse into the consciousness and the culture of our community the importance of producing our own food as an act of self-determination. So we knew that one of our first projects had to be creating a farm. And so we created in 2006 about a 1/4 acre garden on the east side of Detroit, using the Lasagna method, which is a type of raised bed where you put newspaper or cardboard down first to suppress the grass and the weeds. Then you put compost on top of that and topsoil on top of that and compost on top of that, and you layer it like a lasagna. So we made this wonderful garden with these 3-foot wide beds that we made using the Lasagna method. Unfortunately, we were what you might call gangster gardeners that year. We had really no authorization to be growing on this land. In fact, we had about as much authorization to be on that land as white people did when they came over here to this continent, which is absolutely none. So a developer bought the land at the end of that growing season, and we had to move. In 2007, we moved to a second location. We grew there during 2007. The beginning of 2008, we got a call from the owner of that land saying that we couldn't use it again. As fate would have it, we had been negotiating with the city of Detroit for 2 years prior to that for 2 acres of city-owned land to create a model urban organic farm. In June of 2008, we began D-Town Farm in Rouge Park in the city of Detroit, which is the largest park in the city. The farm has since grown from that 2 acres, but we started as 2 acres. And we started as an all-volunteer organization. We had no funding. We had no grants. We only had the money that we put in out of our pockets, the tools that we brought. In fact, many times my minivan was a rolling tool shed because we'd have to bring our own tools to work. And we had lots of zeal and lots of determination, and we worked long hours, and we quickly transformed this space into a vibrant, beautiful farm where we continue to grow more than 30 different fruits, vegetables, and herbs. And so in the picture that you're looking at on the left, that's Mama Jackie Hunt, who is an elder and one of our founding members, and she's standing in a field of collard greens. You see in the other pictures watermelon, cabbage, spinach, and we grow many, many other things at D-Town Farm. In addition to growing more than 30 different fruits, vegetables, and herbs, we also raise bees. We keep bees for pollination and for honey production. And in this picture, you see one of our beekeepers, Mama Abba Ifeoma, who is handling one of the trays inside of a beehive, and you can see that tray is full of bees. She's very brave. She doesn't have gloves on. They're using a smoker to kind of subdue the bees, so they're not very aggressive. But still, I have great respect and admiration for those who are beekeepers. I'm not a beekeeper myself, and particularly those who feel comfortable enough to handle the bees without gloves or other protective clothing. The heart of our operation is our composting. In fact, it could be said that the basis for good organic farming is high quality soil. We can't have high quality fruits and vegetables without high quality soil. And so we're making new topsoil at D-Town Farm with our large scale composting operation. And you can see a picture that shows some of the materials that we put into our compost. We make what's called windrows, which are 6-foot high rows that we construct using a combination of wood chips as a carbon source and food waste as a nitrogen source. We have an agreement with the local nonprofit called Forgotten Harvest that collects outdated food from grocery stores in the region. And they bring tens of thousands of pounds of this outdated food to D-Town Farm, and we use that as our nitrogen source in our compost operation. We also have an agreement with the county forestry department, and they supply us with wood chips, which again serve as the carbon source for our operation. So the picture you're looking at was a couple of days after a delivery that we got, and you can see all of those boxes and more that aren't visible in the picture were full of produce, either collard greens or kale or corn that was no longer fit for human consumption. And all of that went to our compost piles. And so we're producing enough compost now at our farm to serve as the only method of fertilizing the soil at our farm. We expect that sometime in the near future that we'll be able to sell compost on a commercial basis, and that will also become another source of revenue for our operation. We use a tractor to turn the compost piles every few weeks, and we have to make sure that the compost piles are properly hydrated. We make sure that we keep the compost piles covered with wood chips to keep the odors down to minimize attracting rodents. We are in almost a wilderness preserve at D-Town Farm. We're in a park, but we're in a section of the park that has lots and lots of wild animals. So we have possums, we have raccoons, we have coyote, we have lots of groundhogs, which are our major animal predator. We have to really guard against groundhogs at our farm. And there's also deer at the farm. We have a 10-foot fence around the farm, 10-foot high fence, which has eliminated the problems with the deer, but we still have smaller animals inside of the farm. And so we have to be conscious of that as we're doing composting to make sure that we're not attracting rodents to the compost operation. We also have 3 large hoop houses that we use for season extension. And you're looking at a photograph of one of the hoop houses this spring. On the left-hand side of the photo, you can see some beans that we planted. Those were green beans. And on the right side of the photo are some young pepper plants, various types of peppers. And so we're able to plant in the hoop houses sooner than we could plant outside. For those of you who live in the South, you're blessed with relatively warm weather all year. In Michigan, we have a relatively short growing season, beginning usually in late April or May and continuing through October. And so as we're looking at how to increase the production of food, hoop houses have become a strategy for extending the growing season. So we're able to plant in the hoop houses much earlier. In fact, last year we had things growing in the hoop house as early as February, and we're able to continue growing usually until about December for some crops. Now, clearly crops that are hot weather crops like tomatoes and squash and beans, you're not going to grow in February, even in a hoop house, unless you have a heated hoop house. Our hoop houses are not heated. We're only capturing the radiant heat from the sun, and typically it's about 15 to 20 degrees warmer inside the hoop house than it is outside. So that additional heat spurs the growth of the plants, and we're able to get a head start on the growing season. And because of the additional warmth, we're able to continue growing later than we could if we only grew outside. We also do lots and lots of agritourism. Our farm is both a production farm and an educational institution. So we give farm tours to hundreds of people each year. We have interpretive signs throughout the farm that provide information to visitors. For example, the sign that's pictured here is talking about Africans in agriculture. And this is a very important interpretive sign at our farm because we realize that part of our mission is to reframe agricultural work for black people in the United States. In fact, not just black people in the United States, but black people throughout the Western Hemisphere. What we've experienced is that because of the trauma imposed on us by enslavement and by sharecropping after enslavement, many of our people have a very negative view about agriculture. And many of us are trying to run as far as we can away from agriculture rather than embracing it. And so part of our job as an organization is to reframe agriculture as an honorable work and as a work that can be an act of self-determination. And so part of how we do that is by putting agriculture more within its historical perspective. So the interpretive sign that is pictured here is talking about the fact that agriculture began in Northeast Africa in the so-called Nile Valley region more than 5,000 years ago. Animal husbandry began in Northeast Africa in the so-called Nile Valley region more than 5,000 years ago. And for those of you who want to do further research, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima's book, Blacks in Science, is an excellent text that provides some information on that. But we also help people visiting our farm see how Africa has made its footprint within the food system in America, and how, as a result of the so-called transatlantic slave trade, or the Ma'afa, that not only were people brought from the African continent to the so-called Western Hemisphere, but also many seeds and plants and animals were brought that are now part of the Western food system. And so we think it's important that we see how our imprint has influenced the world. So we have many other interpretive signs throughout the farm that people visiting the farm can look at and can learn about not only agriculture, but kind of the context and the politics surrounding it. Because for us, we're not just growing food because we think it's important to grow food, but we're growing food also because we know this can serve as a lens to inspire our people to act in a more self-determining way. That once we begin to see that we can grow food and can begin to feed ourselves, then we should also begin to understand that we can make clothing and we can build schools for our children, and that we have the ability to create whatever we need in order to prosper in this world. Many young people in the city of Detroit are exposed to farming for the first time at D-Town Farm. And this is a photograph that was taken this past spring. Some young folks who came out and were volunteering at the farm, and you can see they're having a wonderful time. They were working in the collard green patch, weeding the collard greens, and you can see the joy on their faces. We also know it's important to celebrate agriculture. We know that many of our people, in spite of our best efforts, are not going to be farmers. And so we're finding other ways to bring people to this work. And our annual Harvest Festival is a way of celebrating agriculture. And it's a 2-day festival where not only do we have various what we call learn shops that deal with things like raw food preparation, or identifying medicinal herbs, or how to incorporate mushrooms into your garden, and a variety of other topics. We have all of these learn shops. We also have a children's village, and in the photograph you see on the right, these are children who are painting pots, and then they planted herbs in those pots and they were able to take those home. We have live music. This past year at our Harvest Festival, we had the mighty DJ Kavum, who raps about eco-justice and raps about food and brings it in a way that young people can hear. So we have live music performances. We have keynote speakers. We have vendors. We have food available for purchase. And it's a wonderful way to celebrate the potential of urban agriculture and pull people in who might not come out to the farm to volunteer and actually put their hands in the soil. One of the things that we're very proud of is we recently unveiled an 8 kilowatt off-grid solar power station. Prior to this September, when this was unveiled, we had no electricity at the farm. And so if we needed to use a power tool, we had to use our gas power generator to create electricity. We now have the ability to generate electricity using the sun. And the wonderful thing about this project is it was designed by a 29-year-old brother who was a graduate of Ujamaa Institute, the school that I used to run. And he was introduced to technology at Ujamaa. In fact, he built his first computer while he was at our school. He went on to get 2 degrees in engineering. And we often talk about young people coming back and bringing back what they've learned to our community. He's an actual example of this. He got 2 engineering degrees and came back to us and designed this solar power station. We bought a 40-foot shipping container, a new shipping container. A friend of ours, a brother, donated 10 solar panels to us, which we've had for about 2 years. And we were able to get the local utility company to partner with us to build the frames that we mounted the solar panels on, and also to do the wiring, connecting the batteries and the inverter and what have you that are inside of this shipping container. They built a catwalk on top of it so that we can service the solar panels if there's a problem, and also put a door in the side so that we can use it for storage of our large equipment. Again, all of this was designed by this 29-year-old brother who was a graduate of an African-centered school. And so we're now able to generate electricity at the farm for a variety of uses. We're also very proud of this retention pond, and you can't really appreciate the scale of it from this photograph, but this pond is about 10 feet deep and probably about 25 feet wide. We have a serious problem on our farm with flooding in the back of the farm. The front of our farm is 8 feet higher in elevation than the back of the farm. So what we find is that when it rains, all of the water runs down towards the back of the farm and creates a muddy mess. And so we install this retention pond, which is capturing rainwater. And when this was taken, it wasn't complete. There's two elements that you can't see. One is that we have a windmill, which is aerating the water. The windmill is powering a pump, which creates bubbles in the water, which discourages mosquitoes from laying eggs. The second thing that you can't see is a solar pump, a solar-powered pump, which is pumping the water from this retention pond into two 2,400-gallon tanks that are mounted at the front of the farm about 5 feet above the ground. And so we're using gravity to feed the water from those tanks using drip irrigation tape back down through our fields where we grow food. So this reduces our dependence upon the municipal water system. And I found that there's something magical about rainwater. The plants really respond much better to rainwater than they do the municipal water. It might be due to the chemicals that are in the municipal water, or it might be just due to some stardust that, is being captured as the rain falls to the earth. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but for sure plants seem to like rainwater more than they do the water from the municipal water system. We sell our food at the Wayne State University Farmers Market, which is in the center of Detroit, every Wednesday from June through October. And in the picture on the left, this is Mama Janet Severs, who also was a parent at Ensortiment Institute. Many of the people who were parents or staff members at the school continue to work with us with the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, and Mama Janet is one of those. So she volunteers at our booth at the Wayne State University Farmers Market every Wednesday from June through October. And you can see in this photograph, she's holding some green leafy vegetables. I think that might be collard greens. And in the picture on the right-hand side, this is one of our satisfied customers with two of the different types of kale that we grow, the dinosaur or lacinato kale and the more typical curly leaf kale that people might be used to seeing in grocery stores. We also sell at our farm on Saturdays and Sundays between June and October. We have a farm stand that we had built last year, which is very beautiful. It's red, gold, and green and attracts lots of attention, and we're able to pull that out in front of our farm and sell to customers during the growing season. So D-Town Farm is only part of what our organization does. We take kind of a holistic approach to creating food sovereignty within our community. And so we know that it's very important that this movement is intergenerational. I can remember when I first got involved in the late 60s and the early 70s in our movement, many of us were very short-sighted and thought that in the next year or two that there would be a revolution in the United States and that black people would be empowered and it would pretty much be a done deal. Of course, we didn't understand then that struggle is a protracted process. And in fact, beyond being protracted, it's an intergenerational process. So we now know that in order to sustain our movement towards sovereignty, that we have to have young people who are involved and young people who are trained up to take over the organizations and the institutions that we have begun. So these are two pictures from our Food Warriors Youth Development Program. The picture on the left is a young sister who's a student at Timbuktu Academy of Science and Technology on Detroit's east side, where one of our programs operates. And she's holding some of the garlic that our food warriors grew last year and harvested this summer. And that's some really robust looking garlic that they have. The picture on the right is our community food warriors development program, which operates out of the Shrine of the Black Madonna's National Training Center in Detroit's Central City. And they also have garlic, but they're weighing garlic scapes. And for those who have grown garlic, you know that hardneck garlic shoots out a stem in the spring, which is called a scape. And you can harvest that, and it creates another crop that you can sell or that you can use for consumption. Many people cut them up and put them in stir fries, and they're really absolutely delicious. But also harvesting the scapes is important because by cutting off the scape, it forces the plant to send its vital energy to the development of the bulb, which is the main part that we really want to grow and want it to be large and robust and pungent. And so we're channeling the vital life force of that plant to the part that we want to grow and develop. So by cutting the scape, the plant no longer sends that energy up in order to create a seed pod, which is used for reproduction. It then sends the energy down to create a larger bulb of garlic. We also have a program for teenagers called Food N Flava, in which young people are maintaining gardens, but also they're learning entrepreneurial skills. They're taking the things that they grow in the gardens and they're making value-added products that they can sell. So they get a weekly stipend for participating in the program. Then also they get money from the value-added products that they sold. For example, the members of our Food N Flava program sold pickles that they made at our Harvest Festival this past September. And each of the 7 or 8 young people who were there selling went home with $30 in their pocket from products that they had made. And so we think that's a very important lesson as we're trying to move our young people towards self-determination and self-reliance, that they can see how through their own efforts and their own energies that they can create products that then generate income. We also have a lecture series called the What's for Dinner lecture series, because we understand that just providing better access to good, healthy, clean food is not enough, that we also have to impact the consciousness of our community. In fact, I've had many occasions where I've tried to give produce to people, and because we've lost so much of our food culture, people look at a fresh beet and say, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Or a fresh eggplant and say, what can I do with that? Because we've lost much of the knowledge that our foreparents had about the preparation of fresh, whole foods. We have generations now of people who have grown up eating fast foods out of packages and styrofoam boxes. In fact, things that probably would best be called food-ish. So we have to impact the consciousness of our people in order to get them to eat more of these fresh fruits and vegetables. Just providing access in and of itself will not change people's habits. But also we want people to think more critically about the whole food system, about where food comes from, how it's processed, who's profiting from it, who owns the land that it's grown on, all of the implications of food. So our What's for Dinner lecture series deals with a variety of topics that are designed to raise the consciousness of our community about food, where it comes from, who controls it, who benefits from it, and what the benefits to our personal health are. This flyer that you're looking at was from the kickoff lecture of our 2015 What's for Dinner lecture series, and that featured Dr. Jessica B. Harris, who is a food historian, and she has several excellent books out, and I would highly recommend that people pick those books up. One is called High on the Hog. That's her latest book, and it traces, in fact, the subtitle is a culinary journey from Africa to America. And so if you're interested in really seeing how Africa has put its footprint or its fingerprint on American food, her book will be an excellent book to read. But she kicked off our lecture series, and we had 3 other lectures. We do 4 lectures each year and this is an important part of our work. We also know that it's important that we change how we buy food, and we are totally committed to cooperative economics. So we run a program called the Ujamaa Co-op Food Buying Club. And the way that works is that we partner with a distributor, United Natural Foods Incorporated, which is the largest health food distributor in the United States. We have online access to a catalog of more than 10,000 items. And so the members of our buying club each month go online, place their order. Once a month, this truck pulls up to our office. We unload the truck. We divide people's orders up. They come pick up their orders, and they're able to realize a discount or savings on their food dollar by aggregating the collective buying power of several people. Of course, the more people we get buying, the deeper the discount is that we can realize. But it involves people beginning to think differently about how we obtain food. Right now, most of us are used to going to a grocery store and we'll buy the food that we need maybe for the next week or the next 2 weeks. Buying from a buying club like this involves having to buy some things in larger quantities, to buy things in bulk. So, for example, if you want to buy cooking oil, you can't just buy one bottle of cooking oil from our buying club. You have to buy a case. So that requires you to think about how much cooking oil you use a week and how many weeks it will take you to use these 12 bottles in a case, and to put the money together to buy a case instead of buying it one at a time. So ultimately, you're saving money, but it requires you to allocate the money in different increments. It also requires us to think beyond just our individual families, because we have what's called splits. Well, let's say one person wants to buy half a case of rice milk, but they don't want the whole case. And so another member of the co-op can pick up that other case, and so it encourages us to buy collectively and to begin to think collectively and think cooperatively, and to get out of this individual mindset, which is absolutely killing us and which makes no sense at all economically. The reality is that if we put our money together, enough of us put our money together, that we can get products for the same price, the same wholesale price as the stores that we're going to buy these items. It makes absolutely no sense for us to spend money at stores which usually are not even owned by members of our community, and to give them money for items that we can just eliminate them. We can eliminate the middleman and go directly to distributors, or in the case of the produce that we're producing, go directly to the producers, and realize the savings on our food dollar, and take that savings and use it to circulate within our community to create wealth and empowerment. So the picture you see on the right is Sister Akila Muhammad, who's a member of the Nation of Islam, who buys from us, and she is a happy, satisfied customer with some almond milk and a few cleaning supplies and some other items that she's bought from the Ujamaa Co-op Buying Club. The buying club, however, was always intended to be a precursor for a cooperative grocery store that we're working on opening. And that store is called the Detroit People's Food Co-op. We expect the Detroit People's Food Co-op to open sometime in the fall of 2017. This will be a brand new 7,500 square foot of retail space, cooperatively owned grocery store in the city of Detroit, in Detroit's North End. But not only will it be a cooperatively owned grocery store, it's really part of a larger development that we're doing called the Detroit Food Commons. So adjacent to this grocery store, this cooperatively owned grocery store, will be an incubator kitchen where people who are now producing cakes and pies and pickles and value-added products in their kitchens can now come into a licensed environment and prepare items that can be put in the retail market, both in our retail cooperatively owned grocery store and also in other retail outlets throughout the Detroit area. We'll have 6 workstations where any 6 caterers or chefs or food entrepreneurs could be working at one time preparing items. We'll also have a community meeting space that will be used for the monthly meetings of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, will be used for our lectures, will be used for films that we show periodically, and will also be available to community members for weddings, for receptions, for conferences, for workshops, and other community uses. In addition to that, we're going to have a cafe attached to the store, which will seat about 50 people, a healthy foods cafe. And we will have the offices of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network also in the Detroit Food Commons. So we're currently recruiting members for the Detroit People's Food Co-op. It costs $200 to become a member owner, and that $200 can be paid all in one whop if you're a big fish, or if you're a small fish like me. We have a payment plan where you can do 2 payments of $35 and 4 payments of $30, which will bring you up to the $200 level. And so the thing about it is that a co-op is owned by the members. And we think that within the context of a capitalist system, which, by the way, we think is a terrible system, we're totally opposed to capitalism. But within the context of a capitalist system, which is what we're faced with at this particular point in time, the only way that we can build collective power and to galvanize our collective strength is through cooperatives. We can't do it through individually owned black businesses. In fact, while we hear a lot about the importance of buying black, and I advocate buying black as well, buying from an individual black merchant or service provider doesn't necessarily translate into our entire community being lifted up. Many times what we see is that these store owners may become well-to-do, their children go to college, they have a nice house, they have a nice car, and they may employ a few other black people, maybe. But that doesn't necessarily translate into collective wealth and collective empowerment for our community. The co-op model, on the other hand, because it's cooperatively owned, allows for widespread ownership of these businesses. And if the business makes a profit, that profit is shared collectively by those who are the owners. We think that's a superior model. It's consistent with our culture. In fact, the word Ujamaa, of course, was popularized as part of the Nguzo Saba, created by Maulana Karenga. And Karenga created the Nguzo Saba after studying many of the traditional values that are practiced throughout the African continent. So Ujamaa is actually, as you probably know, a Kiswahili word that comes to us from East and Central Africa that means cooperative economics, but it also means familyhood. In fact, the root of Ujamaa is the Arabic word Jamaa, which means family. About 30% of the words in Kiswahili, in fact, are from Arabic. And so the idea of Ujamaa is that we really are family. We're responsible for each other. And so as we're looking at creating an economic system, it can't be one that's based on putting one above the other and one profiting over another, but it has to be based on lifting all of the members of our community. And so that's traditionally how African culture functioned. In more recent times, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, the first president of independent Tanzania, implemented a series of what's called Ujamaa villages, where villages were producing for their own need, were creating schools, were farming, and trying to move towards being more self-reliant. So, of course, that model has inspired many of our people here in the Western Hemisphere, and we continue that legacy through the Ujamaa Food Co-op Buying Club and also through the Detroit People's Food Co-op. We're also working with a number of others to create the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And that will emerge to the public sometime in the spring of 2016, this year. The National Black Food and Justice Alliance is a national network of black-led organizations working towards advancing black leadership, building black self-determination, institution building, and organizing for food sovereignty, land, and justice. And so a small group of us will be doing a retreat in February in South Carolina to put the rest of the details together about this national alliance. And then we'll be asking many of you to work with us so that we can collectively empower ourselves and create a movement nationally for food sovereignty in black communities throughout the United States. But we also understand that our problems as a people are not confined to the geographical boundaries of what is now called the United States of America. And so Although it's called the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, it's our intention to have a Pan-African connection and to reach out to other black folks in the Western Hemisphere and throughout the world who are also striving for food sovereignty and find ways to share knowledge, to share skills, and when appropriate to import and to export foods so that we can figure out how to get black-grown food on black plates. If you'd like more information about the work of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, there's several ways to contact us. You can call us at 313-345-3663. Again, that's 313-345-3663. You can check out our website, which is www.detroitblackfoodsecurity.org. Again, that's www.detroitblackfoodsecurity.org. You can contact us on Facebook, and we're on Facebook as the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. So I appreciate so much the opportunity to share with you the work of our organization. I want to commend the sisters and the brothers who put together this Black Sustainability Summit and encourage that we move beyond discussion to actually connecting the dots so that we have a movement of black people who are concerned about growing and producing food, who are concerned about the economics of food and using food as an economic stimulator for black communities. In fact, the reality is that food is the first economy of any society. That if we're serious about Buy Black and we're serious about circulating black dollars in black communities, the most logical place to start is with food, something that's a common denominator for us all. So we would encourage you to look for efforts like the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and other efforts that are bringing black people together so that we can figure out how to produce our own food, how to create wealth from that food, and use that as a basis for creating self-determination, and also use that as a lens so that our people are inspired to not only provide our own food, but are inspired to grow and produce the other things that we need for our survival and to prosper in the world. Thank you so much. I'd like to end as I began by giving praise to the Creator, giving honor to our ancestors. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Peace and blessings.